part of Standing Stone, Paul McCartney's latest work, which is to be heard at the Albert Hall on Tuesday.
Yes.
With full symphony orchestra, choir, and the whole works. And
full Monty.
and the CD's been released as well a couple of weeks here. And you tell me it's number 2 here, number 1 in America.
That's right, yes.
Must be very satisfying.
It is great, yeah. Do you actually think, as we sit from New York to LA, Chicago to New Orleans, all those people...
That's right.
It's magic.
Let's talk then a little bit about this book many years from now, because you say in this book that it's a way of setting the record straight. What needed to be set straight?
Well, I think, when John and I and George and Ringo worked together, we thought of ourselves as very equal. That was the great thing in the group. If Ringo didn't like a song, he vetoed it. Seriously, and he would just say, I don't like it, and we just wouldn't do it. And everyone's... So that's how it was when we were working. Then when we split up, it became more of a concentration perhaps on Lennon and McCartney as being the writers in it. And then, obviously, when John's tragic death, it became very much naturally centred on John as the sort of spirit behind the Beatles, which, in many ways is quite right. But I think, unfortunately, some people tended to overdo that and assume he was the only thing in the Beatles in many ways, But I think for wit, he and Ringo were probably sort of the two wittiest, So I think really that it was a question of me thinking, well, I'd better stick it down now before the memory goes completely, which is going fast, even as we speak, it's ebbing away. And I'd better get with someone I know and can trust, like Barry Miles, who wrote the book, to actually just put forward my side of things, because it's the kind of thing that was starting to happen was, George Martin wrote a book called The Summer of Love, and he asked me to proofread it just to see if his memory was the same as mine. And he got to a song called Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, and he said, well, this was John's song completely. And John wrote this, very typical of John, da-da-da-da-da-da. So I had to ring him up. I said, George, no, it was John and I. I said, we sat down. I contributed half of the song. I remember clearly arriving at John's place, it's in the book here, where he had this little drawing that Julian, his son, had done. And across the top of it, in this very naive children's writing, was Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. John said, what about that for a title? I said, fantastic. He said, well, come on, let's go upstairs and write it, which we did.
Just like that?
Just like that. Well, that was one of the beautiful things about our relationship. We hardly ever took more than 3 hours over a song.
Really?
And I don't remember ever having a dry session. The nearest it came was a song that ultimately was called Drive My Car.
Yes.
That I brought.
Norwegian Wood, that was that the LP?
Pardon?
Norwegian Wood, the LP?
Yeah,
I think it was. I'm trying to prove. I can't remember.
I can't remember things. I was talking about the memory. Here we have it. But things like that, where it's almost a better story that John just wrote Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds himself, that it's attributed to LSD, etc., etc. All the little legends that have grown up about it. But unfortunately, it's just not true. That I was there and we had a great session because we loved the subject matter. It wasn't about LSD, because otherwise it would have been called Litzwood, because the initials aren't LSD. Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds is more like, But it was made up, as were the sort of Paul is dead rumours. All these, the climate, as you remember, was sort of a bit crazy anyway. And once an American DJ got hold of this stuff. So I think with all these distortions that were beginning to happen, there's a kind of sort of revisionism was starting, I sensed. And I thought, well, look, I don't want to kind of put John down at all. I mean, I'm his biggest fan. I'm the last person to do that because I really feel very privileged and loved every second that we had together. I mean, well, let's face it, Lennon McCartney, to be McCartney in the Lennon McCartney songwriting partnership was fantastic, as I say. But I thought it was time to set one or two little things straight, like that Lucy in the Sky thing. I said, okay, I arrived there. John would then say, picture yourself, because it was very, very John opening that, because it's very Lewis Carroll.
Yes.
Picture yourself.
Yes.
John and I both loved Alice. So it was kind of our starting point rather than LSD.
Yes.
It was more Alice in Wonderland. You know? So we went through it. I came out with newspaper taxis. He'd parry with, go with the looking glass eyes. I'd come out back with kaleidoscope or whatever this. Cellophane, it's always been a favourite word of mine, that cellophane. But so that was basically the idea. So I thought, well, Whether people believe me or the revisionism doesn't really matter to me,
put
but
it down.
I think I ought to get it down.
You're talking about we got a song here from the very early days, just From Me to You. I mean, was that written in the same sort of way that you describe? A sort of
Yes.
What was the genesis of that song?
Yes, it would. In the early days, John and I would literally take our two guitars and sit wherever we were. I seem to remember a bit of this was done on a tour coach, in a hotel room, often on the twin beds, with John just sitting on one of them, me on the other, and we'd be the afternoon when we'd done our sound check or whatever. We looked at the hall, and we had from now till the evening, and rather than go to the flicks or something, we'd sit down. We think, let's write a song, and we'd just trade off each other, and it was very magical because me being left-handed, I was like a mirror version of him. He could look at my guitar, I could look at his, and it was like looking in a mirror in many ways. It's quite strange, actually. But we could play off each other, and we knew each other so well, having come up in Liverpool together, started writing songs, having come through the whole Beatles thing together. And we could read each other, and we knew what each other was sort of going to think. Well, with From Me to You, we'd had a lot of these I love you, P.S. I love you, she loves you, please, please me. We'd put a lot of that in it. So this was going to get all the I's and me's all in one thing. From me to you, which is a little kind of formula we were using. The pivotal thing I think about it was when we got to the middle. We always called them middle eighths, by the way, even with the 16 bars or 32 or just 3. They were middle eighths to us because we'd heard musicians saying it was the middle eight, and we didn't realise it was 8 bars. It just sounded like a great catchphrase to us. So when we reached the middle 8, it went to a different chord than one we'd used before. It was slightly more sophisticated. And I always remembered that moment in my own personal memory as being, wow, we're really developing now. We're moving away from the 3-chord songs. There's something more sophisticated about this.
All right. But let's hear that and then follow it with, I think, one of the greatest songs ever, popular song ever written, which you wrote. I think you could write that and die happy, couldn't you?
Well,